Hi, I am Marios Charalambous. Welcome back to Long Story Short. This episode is appropriately called Strategy because we're shooting from the place where it was first employed for the first time. We're shooting from Marathon. On my right side is the tumulus of the 192 Athenian hoplites who gave their lives in defense of their city that day. On my left is the gentleman that you saw at the beginning of the video, who was none other than Miltiades, the Greek general at that day. A few kilometers behind me is the beach of Skynias, where the Persian force landed, along with the swamps, where the Persians suffered most of their 6,400 dead. The Battle of Marathon took place on the 12th of September 490 BC, that is almost 2,500 years ago. Because of its strategic implications and time frame, it is widely regarded as a pivotal moment in world history. As Fowler points out in his military history of the Western world, the Battle of Marathon was probably the most important history of the Western world. John Stuart Mill's famous opinion was that even as an event in British history, the Battle of Marathon was more important than the Battle of Hastings. Professor Peter Green excellently points out in one of his books that Marathon was the first cry of a Europe being born. And finally, the Athenian playwright Aeschylus considered his participation at the Battle of Marathon to be his most important achievement in life. Not the playwrights for which he is famous today, but the participation at that battle as he had others engraved on his gravestone. The battle pitted about 25,000 Persians against 10,000 Athenians. The small Athenian force was later complemented by a full muster of 1,000 Plataeans. The small city of Plataea, remaining faithful despite the overwhelming odds in their old alliance with Athens, sent as many men as they could. Just 1,000 men. It didn't do much to turn the tide, to turn the numerical advantage in favor of the Greeks, but it did a lot to bolster Athenian morale. Strategy is a Greek word. And the reason why it passed on to so many languages these days is because it was used here for the first time. Up until that point, when two armies clashed, the objective was to push the other guy out of the field of battle towards uneven ground. Uneven ground meant that the army could no longer hold their line, hold their ranks, so the line broke and the defeated side had to run, had to flee for their lives, even if that meant only minimal losses for the defeated side. The side who ended up controlling the field of battle at the end of the day was declared the victor. But Miltiades changed all that. Miltiades changed all that. For the first time in recorded history, an army moved in the field of battle having a specific plan in mind. Because of the 2.5 to 1 numerical advantage of the Persians, Miltiades knew that he had to thin out certain parts of his line in order to enlarge it and make it at least as long as the Persian line to avoid being enveloped, being encircled. Knowing that traditionally the Persian elite troops, the imperial guards, fought at the center of each of the Persian formations, he decided to thin out his center and keep his wings intact. And so the battle was joined. At about 6 o'clock in the morning, as it is estimated now in the modern days, of 12 September 490 BC, 10,000 Athenians and 1,000 Plataeans charged at 25,000 Persians waiting for them. Miltiades was taking a risk. He was taking a risk because he had assumed during the drafting of his battle plan that his wings would be able to rout the Persian wings fast enough before his center collapsed. He also took the risk of trusting in his lieutenant's ability to control their men after they routed the Persian sides, to turn back in a double pincer maneuver, envelop the Persian center and thus relieve the hard-pressed Athenian center before it collapsed. But the risk that Miltiades took was perfectly calculated. Greek armor, training, and above all, will to fight were far superior to those of the Persians. And so, by the end of the day, a cry could be heard above the plains of Marathon. The cry of a newborn Europe. So to cut a long story short, any strategy entails a certain level of risk by definition. Strategy means taking calculated risk, just like those risks that Miltiades took. It doesn't mean taking a risk, it doesn't mean taking any risk. It certainly doesn't mean waiting for others to make decisions for you. Oh, and by the way, culture doesn't eat strategy for breakfast. But that is a long story short for another time.